On this week's GTA 6 o'clock, another band hints at GTA 6 involvement. So he's just throwing out some of the biggest franchises in gaming going, we'd like to be in one of these. An in-depth look at Ambrosia. This for me I think is maybe the most interesting area of the map. And a haunted motel.
Will there be a supernatural element to GTA? 100%.
It's all here on this week's GTA 6 o'clock. Hello and welcome to episode 79 of GTA 6 o'clock, the world's most in-depth and best connected GTA 6 show. I am your host, James JJ Jarvis, and on this week's show, we're visiting a key location from GTA 6, Ambrosia. And to do that, pumped up on sugar and ready to join a biker gang is co-host Dan DD Dawkins. Hello, Dan.
That is right, live from the sugar capital of Leonida. Here I am.
And with your biker name, which would be... I've left a pause here, Dan, for you to fill in a gap.
Nathan, pause while I... Is there an official way I'm supposed to do this?
No, I don't think there is. I put some names through a biker name generator. If you would like to select one of these, it came up with Ace, Little Fox.
I have to do this properly.
Groundhog, Big Texas, Mr. Chips. Mr. Chips is quite UK-centric. He's the guy from Catchphrase. You want to be him? Okay, let's move on.
That went really well. I felt like I didn't understand the assignment then.
I tried to find a thing that would do biker name generators, but there aren't really any. Doesn't seem to be a way of doing it that's like come up with your biker name. So I just thought you might have had a fun nickname to throw in.
I've never considered the possibility of being a biker, nor have I seen it's your pet name plus your your married name or whatever it is. So there we are.
Fine. Well, okay. If you've got any suggestions, let us know in the comments while we jump into this week's episode, which is going to cover Ambrosia. If you're new here, this is going to be a sort of mini series of videos that dives into the areas of the map that we know about, thanks to the trailers and the website information that we've got available. We're going to do all of the ones that have been announced. Will we do these one after the other? Maybe, maybe not. But eventually, we will have a suite of videos that you can go and look at, which will cover all of the announced areas and go over some of the screenshots that we haven't previously talked about when we did the big trailer 2 breakdown. So Dan, Ambrosia. This for me I think is maybe the most interesting area of the map because it's been pretty unmapped, by the mapping community. And it feels like it's maybe the one we know the least about so far, apart from the official information, which we'll get onto. It's described on Rockstar's website as the battle for health and wealth of Leonida begins here. In the heart of Leonida, American industry and old school values still reign supreme. Whatever the cost, the Allied Crystal Refinery provides the jobs, while the local biker gang provides almost everything else. Now, I think in real life, this is expected to be a recreation of Clewiston? Florida locals, please write that out phonetically for us.
Oh, if you thought that went badly, get ready for this.
And the surrounding Lake Okeechobee, which is in Florida, obviously. Yes. So Lake Okeechobee, as now we all know how to say it properly. That's the real life recreation of this. It's a region that serves as a major hub for sugar production in the United States and is described as a close-knit community. It feels a little bit, on that description and knowing where it is, a bit like sort of Sandy Shores in GTA 5, but like a sort of bigger version of it where you've got the biker gangs and you've got the trailers and that kind of stuff. But there are 5 official screenshots which aren't part of the trailer for this location, which we have seen. This is the first one with the biker gang all together. Now, we have looked at this one before and covered it on a previous episode, so we won't dwell on it too much, but you can see that these guys are part of the Final Chapter Motorcycle Club, formed in 1982 by the looks of things on their jackets. One of them has a John Samuels whiskey branding on his jacket, which is a take of Jack Daniels, the whiskey, which I think is the first time that this brand has appeared in-game in GTA 6. Hasn't been in any previous GTAs. And then we've discussed this before. There's a lot of banners and things around for Erin Henshaw for mayor. And underneath one of these, it says, finally a politician with balls. Another sign says, the right choice for Ambrosia. So there may or may not be some kind of mayoral, some kind of election for a mayor going on within the game, or it just could be a bit of storytelling that is happening in this area. There's also what you can see here is a used cars for sale sign, which I think we've seen in a few other screenshots, which could suggest if you are having to go out and buy your own vehicles, that you could buy a cheap one that was maybe not as reliable as one that you'd get brand new if you didn't have the cash. Speculation. You're probably going to hate that mechanic, Dan, because that means you can buy a car and it might break down.
Not for me, thanks.
Good. Okay. And finally, there's a big billboard that you can see here for Tiny Frank, proud allies of diversity and treats, which from a little bit of looking around seems to be a parody of Little Debbie, which is a real life baked goods brand sold by McKee Foods. And the name of Tiny Frank apparently is a slang term for small penis. Did you know that? I didn't know that.
I don't. I think maybe if I was asked that on a national quiz show, I might have guessed that the word Frank was related to wiener.
Okay.
But, I mean, let's be honest, the answer really is no. I didn't know that. The thing I would say about all of this, and I think I said this on the previous show, is Ambrosia feels like the front lines of the cultural war that has gripped real-life America and no doubt will be part of Leonida, and no more so than in the signs you see for the mayorship we talked about, where it seems that there's way more signs for effectively the sugar factory sponsored candidate than there is that what looks like the equivalent of the Democratic candidate. Yet you've also got this sense of like corporate America being at slight disconnect to the maybe the views of the residents, where you've got these sort of diversity and inclusion initiatives at fast food stores. It contrasted with local mayorship being run by what looks like more sort of MAGA style right-wing politics. So the extent to which GTA goes there, we don't know, but it feels like it's part of the background. And what you definitely got is a region that's, dilapidated, struggling, struggling with poverty. And as a result of that, drugs, the illicit economy is far stronger in this area. So this feels like a lot of the seedy underbelly of Leonida looks like it lives here.
Yeah, and I think everyone's favourite term, let's extrapolate that to real life ways of voting. It has been Republican for almost, as far back as you can go in terms of like the real life voting of this area that it is based on.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. And I guess expected, right?
Yeah. So the second screenshot we've got of this is this cityscape at night. Now you can see here an Allied sugar plant in the middle of the screenshot, and there's a big tower here with the US flag on it, which doesn't tell you much, but it's actually good in the next thing that we're going to look at for orienting ourselves and where we are with other shots that we can look at. I think the most impressive thing we talk about here is just the scale, because it's nighttime, you can't see very much. But the scale of everything, the boats that you can see in the water here are like tiny, really small. And we know how big the boats are because we've seen them in other screenshots. So just the whole expanse of the land of this area is big. And we've talked about it on the podcast a lot of times, and Rockstar themselves have stated this is going to be the biggest GTA to date, which all of the mapping projects correlate with. But I think this is just another good sense of like just how big everything is going to be, how long it's going to take you to get from one bit to the other.
And if the mapping project people are correct, and they usually are, the Lake Okeechobee,
there you go,
which is like a large mass of water. It's sort of broadly in an American football style oval shape, circle to oval shape, on which in the southwest corner is the key industrial conurbation. So I guess on this screenshot, potentially we're looking sort of southwards to southwestwards from the river down. A lot of assumption there, but if as true, the big industrial thing is there, that's how this would look. So were you to continue looking down or travelling, you'd be heading towards the Glades, Miami itself, etc., etc. But this is it's a really dark and stormy screenshot, so I think our eye line cuts off at a certain point.
One interesting thing to point out here is there is a stadium, or what looks like some kind of stadium on the right-hand side, which could be like a drag racing track. In real life, they've got the Hendry County Motorsports Park around this area, which is billed as the southernmost dirt track in America. So I think there is some kind of motorsport activity going on here this way. There's also, as we'll see later, I think the Thrillbilly Mud Club, which we saw in trailer 1, is also around this region. Might not necessarily be directly in Ambrosia. It could be between Ambrosia and Port Gellhorn, but it's up and around here. It
does feel, this is very broad generalization, it feels like there's an overlap in terms of the way people look and the demographics. Like you say, I think it's probably a little bit outside of the industrial conurbation. I like using the word industrial conurbation. But let's wait and see.
So to back this up, we then can look at the Ambrosia postcard, which does show you this same tower with the US flag on it, but it's actually looking in another direction, and it's at what I'm going to say dusk now rather than in the deepest, darkest depths of the night. So you can see a few more details going on here. We've got the Alloyed Crystal official office building. We've got a billboard on the far left that says "Suck It." Now, that could be taken two ways, but considering we're talking about sugar refinery and all of that kind of production, this is, I'm going to say, potentially like a reference to sweets, but in a fun way, to be like, hey, we've invented this new thing, which is like a sweet, that, like a hard-boiled sweet that you suck on, and some of the advertising around that is probably "suck it" in a fun Rockstar GTA way, unless it's something else. But for it to be in this region and for it to say "suck it" feels sweet related to me.
It would be a bit too on the nose for it to mean something more lurid.
And as I said before, the background of this postcard has a monster truck silhouette on it, which does, suggest big trucks and things. Thrillbilly Mud Club has a lot of monster trucks driving around it, so you can connect those two things there. And the people who are doing the car washing, which we'll see in screenshot 5, also wearing the same bikini as the lady who is at the Thrillbilly Mud Club, like basically the American flag bikini. You see quite a lot of that same style of bikini around this area when people are like going out and having a good time.
Yeah, and it feels like this is, again, drawing lots of lines between things, more like MAGA Heartland, American Patriot. It just makes sense that people would wear... Like in the UK, for example, there's a connotation for people who portray Union Jacks and this kind of thing. I think if you were to wear a Union Jack bikini, it would suggest certain things about your values.
The next screenshot is this one of these two people who I don't think we know who they are yet. But the guy has a Liberty City Cycles hat on. Now, this is giving me vibes of like The Lost from The Lost and the Damned DLC, which is from GTA 4. Probably just because, this is a motorcycle gang and Lost and the Damned was focused on the motorcycle gang. But what is interesting is the woman in this shot is wearing black nail polish, which is another sign that this could be a customizable feature in the game, I would say. We've talked about this before. We've seen screenshots with nail shops in them. So another sign that that could be a feature. And then I guess the most prominent thing is the gun that she is holding. The gun is a Mustang .357 based on the real-life Colt Python .357 Magnum. Now, in the game, The version of this weapon is manufactured by Duke Arms. So Dan, do you know where we might have heard the weapons manufacturer Duke Arms before?
Well, yes, indeed. It's the same manufacturer behind many of the guns in Red Dead Redemption 2.
That's true, which you have probably finished by now.
Ha!
We'll move quickly on to the next screenshot, which is this like landscape shot. I guess the thing that we can talk about here is there is some bits of this farmland crops on fire. Now, this could either be wildfires, which would be some kind of weather phenomenon that we haven't seen before, which could be present in GTA 6, or it could be like some kind of sabotage. Is this some kind of mission of burning down some of the crops that are there who are producing the sugar or something? There is a truck at the bottom of this shot with 3 figures around it. Read into that what you will. They could be there looking at the thing they're just burning down, or they could be there arriving going, oh my God, all of our crops are on fire. Do you think we might be seeing these kind of extreme weather phenomena in the game? We've talked about hurricanes and storms before, but wildfires, and aren't just mentioned in this screenshot, I should say. They are also in a couple of other things.
Yeah, I think the implications of this are potentially quite huge. I think we're Rockstar to implement, for example, the truly random or dynamic wildfire system. If it's anything like real-world wildfires, that could have a really profound effect on the geography of the game. So, almost to the point where I think you'd almost have to constrain it or control it.
Yeah.
Or make it part of a mission, because if it's random, it's huge. And like in many locations in the real world, wildfires can devastate not just the immediate community, but like hectares, tens, if not almost hundreds of kilometers of terrain. So that would be a huge thing. So I wouldn't have thought, I don't know what you feel, I wouldn't have thought it's something that's allowed to run truly dynamically, or must be constraints on where it occurs and how.
Yeah, I think it's much easier to do weather effects, especially like thunderstorms, dynamically, because that shouldn't, although can, affect some bits of the map. But, if it's a lightning storm and it hits a tree, maybe the tree falls down. Maybe you can engineer that to be a random event. But fires, have to leave some kind of damage behind. And if it's destroying whole fields full of crops, you'd want to be able to go back to that field and it still be damaged, over time, or things been growing back. It takes a lot of procedural stuff to make that happen. Whereas if it's a main event, or as you say, part of the story, makes sense. In the same way that we've discussed tornadoes and hurricanes, if that was to at some point go through the map and take out some buildings, that would be a very big step change in the way that area of the map would then exist. Like, it would have to be destroyed for the rest of it, or be destroyed and then start getting rebuilt over time. So, yeah, I think restricting it to a mission or keeping it contained somehow might be the way it goes, if in fact it's a thing that is even going to be in there.
Yeah, it's a good backdrop or accelerator to a mission to create tension. They did it at the end of GTA San Andreas. There's a fire. Obviously, it didn't look very realistic then, but created an extra layer of tension. You could imagine a mission where you have to retrieve something or someone from fields that are actively ablaze, and that being like quite nerve-wracking and quite a good dynamic setup. And maybe then that region stays destroyed. But if it feels like it would be a trigger event rather than a, oh my God. Or, if you were just to randomly go around the map with a flamethrower burning all the fields, like, would it let you do that? Or would it, would there be something stopping that?
Yeah.
That's a bigger question I can't answer.
I mean, the fires like that would have to go out. Like, if you throw a grenade into some shrubbery, it's going to burn, but we wouldn't then expect it to spread across the entire forest that shrub is in.
Yeah, just because you've had a bad moment, as in gone with a flamethrower into crop fields, means that the map is forever destroyed and a town is ruined, would be really extreme. So I think there'll be caps on that sort of thing.
Well, moving from fire to water then, in perhaps the greatest segue that's ever occurred, here we are at the car wash. The interior of the car here, I think, is the main focus because there's a lot more detail going on in the previous games. You can see here the rear view mirror is reflecting the insides of the car. There's a central control panel here which has settings for vehicle, assist functions, navigation, users, audio, seats, climate control and settings. And then below that there's also quick options in the bar below it for calls, maps, music, settings, search and notifications. Interesting, there's a mobile phone reception bar in the top right of that panel, which only has 2 bars. Now that could always have 2 bars on it. Or, as we've talked about before, could there be a dynamic mobile phone reception gauge? If you go up into like the hills, you get less reception, less things are available to you. This could be a hint towards that. And if you look through the steering wheel, you can see that the vehicle setting is set to comfort. But perhaps the most important thing here is there is what could be a fuel gauge symbol, which is not full. Now, is it a fuel gauge symbol? I think that's probably up for debate. It could be an oil gauge symbol and a water gauge symbol, and actually there isn't a fuel symbol on this dashboard at all. But for the purposes of being contrary, I'm going to say it is a fuel gauge symbol, and that means, oh boy, could we be getting the refueling we all want?
Who can tell? I think with a lot of these things, like if you look at the control panel, it's kind of a mirror or a map of Apple CarPlay or Android CarPlay.
Yeah.
Do I think that every single icon on the touchscreen will open a sub-menu and you'll be able to navigate it? I don't think so. It feels a bit... I think for me it's the illusion of realism rather than the stultifying layer by layer check. I just don't believe that to be true. Something that is interesting, and again, this might be a realism detail. I saw people talking about, it's hard to verify without doing this with a high-res screen, you can see a thumbprint on the thing. Now, that I guess that implies that a screen's been touched, but I think that's more as a realism gesture rather than, let's say, going into first person and placing a big fat finger on the thing. You never know, maybe, but that's just so inside baseball. I don't know if they'd want to do it or if it would bring that much benefit. And it could be similar with the fuel gauge. The fuel gauge could be a dynamic fuel gauge that goes up and down, or it could be, all the cars are stuck at 3/4 full. We don't know. Similar with the mobile phone bar. I would be surprised if, this is my take, would be surprised if there's a truly dynamic mobile phone reception that, say, fluctuates between 1 and 5. But I wonder if there's it gives them the license, if they want, to remove your ability to use a phone, making certain missions more perilous. It's the same reason a lot of movies, they prefer to set them before the 2000s or whenever mobile phones became a thing. It's like so many films before that period wouldn't have been films if people had mobile phones. They'd have just rung someone. So there's definitely a narrative reason to want to cut off your ability to use a phone to call in help or to say where you are or whatever it is. I think that's quite an interesting device to have up your sleeve. But I would be surprised, I don't know what you think, surprised if you have to I've got to walk 10 meters up this mountain and hold my phone in this way in order to get reception. As a consistent thing.
Sure. I don't know. We've talked about this before, and I think it could be quite a neat mechanic. Whether or not I would get too annoying when it came to actual gameplay terms. But let's say it only happens in one specific area of the map. So most of the time you go, maybe it moves between 2 and 3 bars, but that doesn't affect anything. But you go into a cave in a mountain and you don't get any reception. It could play into that thing that we all have now, I'm sure, when you go somewhere new and suddenly you're like, why isn't my phone working? And then you're like, actually, I rely on my phone quite a lot, and now I can't do anything. It could be, like you say, part of a mission, or I see it being possibly as part of a certain area where they just go, phone reception dead in this area. Work it out for yourself.
What I would hate is, for example, to have to manually go into first person to use my fingers on the rip-off equivalent of Apple CarPlay to press the maps icon and then rely on me having sufficient reception so I can press the button that says petrol stations so I can on my GPS find out where the petrol station is so I have to fill up my car. That is so much like the worst things of reality. Rockstar would be... I mean, maybe people want that. If that, for me, would be the worst bits of reality to mimic.
That is maybe the most extreme example of what might happen.
It is.
And I don't see that happening.
But it's all here in this screen, theoretically.
Yes.
Theoretically.
Yes. This could all be a hint towards that dream.
It's the worst kind of realism. I don't think that will happen.
Let's have a look at some other things that may or may not happen then, related to Ambrosia. Now, what I've done here is look up some things that are present in the real life equivalent of where we think this suburb is going to be. And actually, there isn't a lot going on up here. They've got a golf course, which I think we are pretty sure golf is probably going to be returning in GTA 6. It'd be weird, I think, maybe if that was something that was cut out. They have the Hendry County Fair and Livestock, which looks very much like a traditional county fair, like small scale fairground, couple of rides, couple of Hook the Duck stalls. I hope those things translate across UK and US. I'm sure it's those kind of party things, pin the tail on the donkey. All of that kind of stuff feels like that's going to be there. There is a lot of mobile home parks and RV parks up in and around that area, which makes sense. Perhaps the most interesting thing is Clewiston has a haunted inn. Get this, Dan. So, in this area, there are 2 rooms at the inn that are believed to be especially haunted. A long-time resident, Anita Conklin, is said to visit room 255, where she lived with her husband, manager of the Miami Seaquarium. She passed away in 1994 after her husband. When this room is vacant, the switchboard lights up with calls from this room. Witnesses say that near the kitchen, something has tugged on their clothing or they felt an eerie presence surrounding them. Room 118 is the second room that is rumoured to be haunted. A woman's apparition appears to be here, but little is known about her. Her ghost has been photographed by the manager, and the employees take care to show respect to the ghosts by knocking on the door before entering. All of which is to say, there is potentially some haunted houses, haunted places in the real life version of this suburb. Could that translate to some kind of in-game activity? I'd like to think so. Like, we've seen ghosts in GTA games before that only appear at certain times. Is there now going to be locations that you can go to that have haunted stuff? I think the explosion of haunted TV shows has happened in between GTA 5 and 6. Like, all of that paranormal investigations going to, especially in the US, old hospital wards or whatever, and walking around with equipment and being like, oh, I think I saw something. Oh, but the camera wasn't pointing at the thing over there. But I really felt something touch me. There could be a play on that somehow coming into GTA 6. I'd like to think that even as a player, we get to investigate some kind of paranormal stuff anyway.
Yeah, I like it. Will there be a supernatural element to GTA? 100%. Almost certainly some variation on Strangers and Freaks and a raft of missions around that. This is a good real-life excuse to set something there. It would also be one of the most interesting things by far about Clewiston. Even if you Google Clewiston, what's it famous for? It's known as America's sweetest town.
Because of the sugar.
Because of the sugarcane. And the sugarcane grows because of the unique geography and climate around Lake Okeechobee, which has fostered the ideal conditions for sugarcane cultivation. But all of the other things Clewiston is famous for include the sugarcane industry. We just talked about that. There's a Clewiston Sugar Festival, and then also the Clewiston Museum. Can you guess what the most prominent thing in it is?
I'd like to say ghosts, but I'm going to say it's sugar.
It's sugar! That's right, it's sugar. So, Clewiston is a place struggling for identity, which I guess plays into more of this sense of why the people who live there feel so disenfranchised and have probably got bad teeth.
Yeah. Because they're going to the sugar festival.
That's
all the
obviously
time.
a joke. And if you live in Clewiston, please set us and me particularly straight.
Yeah, tell us, have you been to the inn in particular?
Have you been to the inn? Is the sweet candy day actually a lot more fun than we've made it sound? All of those things I'd be really interested in. Also, like Lake Okeechobee, all the photographs for the attractions there are people holding giant fish. It's America's second biggest freshwater lake. So I think fishing there feels like a certainty
absolutely.
in some kind.
What I will say is, based on the Haunted Inn, this was a description from a website detailing all of the things, and then people can go onto that website and leave their reviews of how haunted they actually think it is. Every single review on this one was like, we don't think it's... Actually, not every single one. Most of them were like, we don't think it's haunted. We actually think it's the owner who's messing around with, they're going around knocking on doors at night and pretending that they've got a ghost, I guess, to bring in people who want to go and stay in the room and do some ghost hunting.
So you're suggesting a hotel owner in a location that has no redeeming quality for tourists might be faking the supernatural in order to drum up custom? I don't believe it.
That's only what I've read on the internet.
Reveal the truth, Scooby-Doo.
I can neither confirm or deny that until we take a trip to this place and maybe we'll do some fishing in Lake Okeechobee.
Lake Okeechobee.
So another thing that has happened this week then, Dan, is there's been a recent interview at UK Rock Festival, which is called Download, billing itself as a marathon rock event based in the spiritual home of rock, which is Donington Park. That is in the UK, for anyone who hasn't heard of it. The BBC were there interviewing rock band Malevolence, and they asked them if you could feature on any game soundtrack, which one would it be?
Exclusive for BBC. You heard it here first.
If your music could feature on any gaming soundtrack, what would it be and why?
It would have to be Grand Theft Auto. The new Grand Theft Auto. We're trying. The door has potentially been opened, so...
Exclusive?
Failing that, FIFA or Call of Duty.
So he's just throwing out some of the biggest franchises in gaming going, we'd like to be in one of these. But I guess the interesting bit is for... Obviously, every band wants to be in GTA 6.
Yeah.
But for them to say the door has potentially been opened hints at maybe they've been in contact and haven't got a straight no, but they've said, maybe something along the lines of, thanks, we're considering everything. Let us, give us some time, we'll come back to you. If you don't know about Malevolence, they're a hardcore punk band from Sheffield, South Yorkshire in the UK, founded in 2010. It consists of singer Alex Taylor, 2 guitarists, a bassist and a drummer. From the research I can do, their most popular song is Keep Your Distance. I haven't heard about this song or this band before, but it's hardcore rock along similar lines to, I'd say, like the scream punk. There's a lot of shouting going on, a bit Slipknot-esque. People are probably going to get really annoyed at me that I'm comparing those two bands, but it's a bit that kind of style. And I think the thing for us to talk about is, I'm not sure, and correct me if you remember differently, Dan, if GTA has had a radio station that would cater to that kind of music in the past. I don't feel like it has. Like, all of the other rock radio stations have been sort of a bit more mainstream rock, or 80s rock when we're listening to it in 2020, and you're like, it's rock, but it's not this type of music.
Yeah, that's maybe fair. Whether some of those bands or bands at the intersection of those different subgenres of rock have crept in there, we've definitely had more like hair metal or classic rock. But have we had that kind of, I don't know, how would you describe this genre of rock?
Well, they've called themselves a hardcore punk band.
Yeah, I mean, no, look, someone was going to tell me I'm an idiot if I say what genre is what genre, so I'm not going to attempt to do that. But I think in the purest sense, maybe not. Maybe it's been more trad rock-ish, but with a few exceptions. But as a radio station, it would be different.
And so do we think this is a sign of, if, let's take all of this, that these kind of bands are going to make their way into some kind of GTA 6 radio station. It's definitely a different direction of that they're going in musically, and all of the people that we've seen announced or potentially being involved with GTA 6 so far have been from the sort of rap hip hop side of things, maybe a bit of the dance element in there, but this is different, and I guess means potentially that soundtrack is going to be even more eclectic than it possibly has been in the past.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think the stuff you see publicly linked to the obvious things like Drake, or there's been other artists who just feel more like traditional, let's say, Miami clubbing heartlands tracks, where I wouldn't imagine like a, say, hardcore punk band from Sheffield they're not what you would feel is synonymous, right, with Leonida or Miami.
Yeah.
But, would Rockstar do that? Sure. Because, Rockstar North are actually a Scottish development studio in Britain, UK, and they've probably got people who work on the team who really like these bands and these genres of music, as do people in the world, because the world's connected, and it would make sense to have that. So, yeah, like, it's not front and centre of what's being rumoured, but this would make sense. The one thing I would pick on and what the guy replied to the BBC journalist, I don't know, it's hard to say because what his understanding of, like, he says the door has potentially been opened, which is open to a lot of interpretation. Yeah. It might be our agents got an email of someone at Rockstar. Or it could be we're in active dialogue because Rockstar have approached us. I don't know which of those. One of those things would be much more likely than the other to result in appearance in the game. I've no doubt their agent, either urged by the artist or the agent themselves, is trying to get this band in as many major video games as possible, because why wouldn't you?
Of course, yeah.
But the extent to which this is true, what was clear is there's a willing on the behalf of the band.
Yes.
Obviously.
Yeah, as it would be with many bands if you ask them, would you like to be in GTA 6?
Yeah, and were the conversations that advanced? You just don't know, right? Even if Rockstar had contacted them and said, we want you to be in the game, but you need to STFU and not say anything, right? Don't tell anyone and just keep quiet. It could just be the artist has either ignored it or just hasn't been told that and it's not been communicated and it's just blurted something out. I think there's sufficient degrees of separation that someone can just make an honest mistake in the music world. For us working in the world of games, if we're told you must observe this embargo, we have to, because our professional lives are bound up on it. Like, if they betray an embargo, that band still goes on. They still make money from live performances. Like, the propensity for there to be legitimate leaks from bands, I think, is much higher.
Mm-hmm. Well, while we're talking about music, I will briefly highlight this comment from Red Misfit on last week's episode that said, guys, there may be a Georgia section in GTA 6. While you were discussing Jermaine Dupri, it struck me why Rockstar would contact this legendary producer who is deeply rooted in Atlanta rather than Miami. Rockstar typically collaborates with DJs, artists, and others who are closely associated with the specific region they are featuring. If they're reaching out to Jermaine Dupri, it seems likely that there will be a Georgia section with Georgia radio stations. It just makes sense. I hope you can address this in a future episode. I mean, like, for me, yeah, like, it would make sense to have certain artists from certain regions do different things for the game. And we've definitely seen specific radio stations open up in certain areas of GTA 5. Like, you don't get access to all of them in certain regions. So driving to a certain part of the map and getting different radio stations on your selection wheel, like, it's very much a part of the history. I don't see why they wouldn't do that again. And that gives you a lot more options to theme the music to the area that you're in, when you can, like, go to, let's say, the north of the map, and all of those radio stations are playing different music than in the south. And that gives you a lot more artists to collaborate with, a lot more options for music choices, and makes everything feel even more connected. If you're like, I'm up in the north, so I have to listen to this music because that's what's popular up there, it sort of makes sense, and is a bit like how radio stations work in real life, I guess, although now everything's digital, so not really.
Yeah, and that's sort of true in my, like, last year I went on a large drive to the very, very south of France, and all the radio stations I normally listen to
were French.
Well, they were French, but like you move from a point where you can just about get the ones you used to listen to, and there is a point in geography where it stops.
Yeah.
So it makes sense for to have a different type of music. So I think that'd be a nice way to make it makes the map feel bigger as well, because I think if you start to change the mood music, it does feel like I only get this in this location. It's more exotic. There's a homogenizing effect in mainstream culture from being available everywhere rather than being exposed to local media. So I think that it would be fun and good to do that.
Yes, great point, Red Misfit. Please continue to comment on the videos. And if you've got anything to say about this week's episode, you can also go to our YouTube channel and listen to this episode and comment below. If you're not there, you can get in touch with us on Twitter at GTAVOclock and via email gtavio'clock@gmail.com. All of that being said, thank you all for listening. Dan's got one more thing before we go. He wants to say about the newsletter.
Yeah, see, James didn't forget the newsletter. I'm going to make a really extreme plea. I'm on bended knee, and this is partly me begging and partly me insisting. If you haven't already, please sign up to the GTA 6 o'clock newsletter, a free weekly newsletter every week at Thursday, 6 p.m. BST. I say it largely because it's written by me, and it takes hours and hours and hours and hours of time. And I want to feel like I'm not shouting into the void. We do recap a lot of the same stuff as the show, but we also go deeper. We provide links. We talk about things that happened after the gap between recording the show and the newsletter coming out. So please check it out. If you do already read it and like it, please share it with your like-minded friends. Plug ends. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you all for listening. Please hit the subscribe button if you haven't already and comment below. And we will be back next week for another episode of GTA 6 o'clock.